Om Tatsat. Yellarigu Namaskara. Good evening, friends. It's always a great pleasure to come back to the Gokhale Institute of Public Affairs. I continue my lecture series on the Jnapaka Chitra Shaale volumes of DV Gundappa. So far, I have done, I think, 4 series. This is the 5th series of lectures. And we are in the middle of the later part of the 6th volume. A few introductory remarks would not be out of place. What distinguishes broadly Eastern philosophy from the Western philosophy is that in the East, any philosophical learning is meant to be practiced in the life of the philosopher. And this was probably best captured by the famous martial artist and actor Bruce Lee in one of the interviews. He said, all types of knowledge ultimately mean self-knowledge. So whatever we learn, whatever we study, ultimately has to come to the use of the individual in refining his or her life. So the experience of going through these volumes written by DV Gundappa between the years of 1952-53 till his death in 1975 is not just to know about various personalities. Of course, we learn about innumerable great people of the past. It is not just to know about the social history of the old Mysore kingdom, but it is also, very importantly, to lead to a refinement of ourselves. It should work as a samskara for the individual. It is something like a mirror which is kept in front of us and our society. And when we look into that mirror, we get a vision of how things should be or how things can be better than what it is today. After all, that's why it is called Adarsha, something which is ideal in front of us. So there is so much to be learned from these episodes, and people from all walks of life can learn from these episodes. After all, because all walks of life have been captured by Gundappa. It is not just only for the intellectual, it is not just only for somebody who is a middle class person, even a public figure. Today, if any politician reads these volumes, he or she will benefit. If a shopkeeper reads these volumes, he or she will benefit. If a housewife reads these volumes, she will benefit. So the benefit is for everybody because of the immense breadth of the work and the treatment of DV Gundappa. Until the last episode, I had covered M. Venkatakrishnaiyya, who is also known as the Grand Old Man of Mysore or Mysore Tatayya. So today we start with the remarkable personality of KP Puttanna Chetty. As you all know, the Bengaluru town hall is named after Puttanna Chetty, and one of the reasons for that also was that he substantially contributed financially to the building of this town hall. The opening itself of this episode is very interesting. In the years 1905, when Gundappa was working as a substitute teacher in a school in Mudabagal, KP Puttanna Chetty was the deputy commissioner of Kolar. So deputy commissioner of Kolar was a person who would be responsible for all the government departments that worked under him. And as a routine inspection, he had come to the school where DVG was working as a substitute teacher. He inspected all the classes, and finally he went to the headmaster's office, and in front of the eminent guest, the headmaster kept the visitor's book. And Puttanna Chetty wrote down his observations and his appreciation in a few sentences and specifically mentioned DV Gundappa's name. Now, before saying this, DVG, in his very characteristic manner and humility, he says, there is an event that transpired. This may come across as a bit of self-glorification and the readers must kindly indulge me. So even when he is saying something as in a course of explaining about a personality, whenever a reference to him creeps in, which he was really morbidly afraid of, he immediately begs the indulgence of the reader. He says it may appear as self-glorification, but I am saying it only, as a passing information. So KP Puttanna Chetty wrote some glowing words specifically praising DVG. Now this news, it is a small town, Mudubagal, has spread like wildfire. By the evening, everybody in the town knows that Deputy Commissioner had visited, inspected the school, and he has written some words of praise about this young boy. DVG at that time would have been about 18 years old. That was his age. So 18-year-old person who is a deputy substitute teacher, and he has been praised by the Deputy Commissioner, very, very senior position. So then his father was excited. He brought together some of his friends, and they thought, this is a very, very lucky fortune. It's a wonderful situation. It should not be wasted. The situation must be utilized well. So therefore, we must ask this boy to write a letter requesting for a government job, and then go and submit the petition, because it will be fresh in the mind of the official, because a deputy commissioner meets hundreds of people every day. So when it is fresh in the mind of this person, he has been impressed by this boy, so it is a good idea to write a letter. Even as an 18-year-old boy who has never left Mudubagal, DVG was very clear he did not want to enter into government service. That was his vision. So you can appreciate it when you see the background where he was, where he grew up and where he came from, where everybody thought it's a most natural thing to apply for a government service. He, as an 18-year-old, said he was not interested. Then there was a big debate between DVG and his father and friends. This debate went on till late in the night, and finally he says, I am from the old school where, we have certain values of listening to elders. So therefore, the words of the elders prevailed, and I was forced to write this letter. The idea was to go to the traveler's bungalow where the deputy commissioner would be there. And they had a fixed time between 3 and 4 in the afternoon. The DC will accept any petition. And after 4, they will be busy. Before 3, they have other things to do. So this is a kind of a golden period between which you have to go and give the petition. So they all left for the traveler's bungalow. Then there's another big fight started, because they said you should wear a kore rumal or a turban. And DVG said, I'm used to wearing a topi, that is that khadi topi, what we call Gandhi topi. And then there was a big fight. Why should I change just for, impressing somebody? So again, you see DVG's nature. He is not for some false pretenses, just for impressing some official, he will change his ways. That is not him at all. He wants to be who he is, what he is. But there is again argument. Then finally Subba Bhatta, who was father's friend, said, okay, you don't have to wear the turban on the streets. You carry the cloth of the turban cloth with you. There, when you get to the traveler's bungalow, you wear the turban. So this adjustment was made. Finally, after all this thing, when the time they reached, it was already 4 o'clock. And then that guy in the entrance, that Darwani, said, the officer has left, so you can send your petition by post. What is the value of sending it by post? The whole idea is that when it is fresh in the memory and they see the face in flesh and blood, you apply for a job, you have some chance. Sending a letter, that day when you came to this place, you had seen me, all this is not going to work. So submitting the petition was failed endeavor, and for the next 2 to 3 weeks, every day he would get blasted from his father and other people. Don't listen to elders, you are a brooder, arrogant fellow, scant regard for any word of common sense, obstinate idiot, all this kind of gone astray and lost all balance, all sahavasa doshaya, wrong, mixed up with all the wrong people. So like this, result of friendship with scoundrels and all this kind of thing he is getting for a few days he got that. And finally, again, Subba Bhatta stood by his side. What is the big deal if he doesn't get a government job now? Something else will happen. He will get some other job. Is he going to starve? Don't worry. And many years later, after DVG befriended Puttanna Chetty, he narrated this episode, and Puttanna Chetty had a nice laugh. Then next we cut to another episode where Vishwesvaraya used to handpick people for the municipal council. Here we can appreciate the method of, the older generation, where they were able to look for merit and find it. When H.V. Nanjundaya became the Vice Chancellor of Mysore University, he handpicked some of the scholars, even though they may not be a PhD, they may not be well known, based on the merit of the person. Similarly, Vishwesvaraya also handpicked people who are having the stuff, not so much about bothering about the qualifications. So here DVG writes, what is Vishveshwaraya's core belief? Virtuous people who have gained affection and admiration of the masses can accomplish substantial magnitude of work for public welfare only if they have the relevant administrative experience and have familiarized themselves with the administration of the state. So therefore, it is a responsibility of the government to provide an opportunity to such people and encourage them. So that's why he dragged Puttanna Chetty to the municipal council. Although he was not a very well-educated person, we will come to that later about his scholarship. He is not a very well-educated person, but he had the relevant experience and he was a virtuous person. So he said you should come and be a part of the municipal council. Now, any normal person in Puttanna Chetty's place would have said, oh, you are inviting me, of course, I'll be part of it. But he was also very, very, honest, virtuous, and he knew the workings of the government. So he put some preconditions. We remember just when Vishveshwaraya was appointed as the Diwan in 1912, the first thing he did was to call a kind of a darbar of all his relatives and friends, and he said, if you promise me that none of you are going to curry favors with me, ask me some special recommendation and things like that, then I will accept the post of Diwan. If you have some vested interest, oh, our man has become Diwan, we will get our work done, then I will not accept the post. So that was the integrity. Similarly, when Vishveshwaraya requests Puttanna Chetty to join the municipal council and to become the president of the council, he says, if public work has to progress swiftly, sanctions and other authorizations from the government must reach the municipality promptly. This necessitates that the Diwan himself should manage the portfolio of Bangalore's municipality. There must be no animosity between, say, a government councillor and a retired councillor of the municipality. If you can personally take care of the government's accountability, then I shall shoulder the responsibility as per your wish. This is what Puttanna Chetty tells Vishveshwaraya. So if we have to work together, we must have the freedom to take certain decisions. We must have the support from the people at the top. So there is no point in having a nice visiting card with name and designation when you don't have the powers to do what is good for public welfare. So after Puttanna Chetty became the president, Vishveshwaraya called for a big meeting at the city market, what is called as KR market today, and he, large gathering had, assembled, and he was, expounding on a certain topic, and then at that point, DVG, who was a journalist by then, he raised a point. He said something is not okay. Then finally, Vishveshwaraya turned to him and said, oh, you are such a big critic. What can be achieved by mere criticism? Only if you work with us, you will understand our difficulties. And then he leaves it at that. About a couple of weeks after this, suddenly there was a reorganization of the municipal council, and DVG comes to know that Vishveshwaraya has recommended his name to be a member of the municipal council. And when Puttanna Chetty came to know about this, he was also very happy because he knew DVG. But DVG never wanted any positions. He didn't even want a government job. Where will he go and try to lobby for a position in the municipal council? So he rushed to Puttanna Chetty, who was the president, and he said, sir, I cannot take these things up. I have so many things. I have my own responsibilities. Please don't put this on my head. Puttanna Chetty tells DVG, didn't you understand the intent between Vishveshwaraya's words? If your criticism must be fruitful, it must be knowledgeable and constructive. And if you don't experience the workings of the government firsthand, how will you be able to understand what goes behind it? It is very easy to just make some criticism and comments. But when you work with the government, you know what really it takes, and therefore youngsters like you should take the responsibility. Now, what is DVG's age at that time? Not even 27, 28 years. A 28-year-old person being requested by people of the stature of Vishveshwaraya and Puttanna Chetty, who are 20, 30, 40 years older than him. So you can imagine, and that was an age where it was a period of meritocracy. It was not like a period of nepotism and this kind of thing like today, lobbying. So these people were very known for meritocracy and picking the right people. So if somebody like Vishveshwaraya and Puttanna Chetty have to pick a young boy who's 28 years old running not a very famous newspaper or something, it was coming twice a week, the Karnataka. So you can imagine his caliber from this. In fact, one of the things that will be very useful as an exercise is when you look at the various episodes that DVG narrates and try to map his age, and you put his age at what age he was doing these kind of things. When you look at that span, you will be amazed to see that from a very, very young age, he has been gaining the respect and admiration of people much older than him, and people who are not so easy to please. So that is the kind of caliber we see in DV Gundappa's public life. And DVG agreed to become a municipal councillor, and he served under Puttanna Chetty for about 4 or 5 years, and he really enjoyed that time, because for DVG more than anything, this was an opportunity to serve the people and also to connect with other eminences of his time. So he writes about people like, B.K. Garudachar and Venkataranga Ingar, Pashampalli Adeppa and Polepalli Chinnaswamy Shetty and Magadi Karnika Krishnamurti, Usman Khan. So many people, he worked with all of them and he befriended them, and this continued even outside of his tenure as a municipal councillor, and he has written about many of these personalities as well in these volumes. One of the distinguishing features of Puttanna Chetty that DVG writes about is the worldly wisdom of Puttanna Chetty. Practical wisdom is very important for a public figure. You can call it tact, you can call it strategy, but it is very, very important. Now, this tact does not mean dishonesty. So this is something very important to keep in mind. We can't equate this tact or finesse or diplomacy with falsehood, because falsehood is something which is not right. But disclosing the truth without any harshness, revealing only as much as is required for the people, as much as is required for a committee, and presenting the information in such a way that doesn't attack anybody. So these kind of things come under tact. It is not telling a lie. Now, sometimes people think that truth has to be very brash and bitter and in your face. But in public life, it should not be, and it cannot be so brutal. It has to be very soft, it has to be covered, and the tone of presentation, the same thing has to be presented very well. Sometimes we find, even today, right, when we see some of the politicians, the popular politicians and popular leaders are the ones who are able to present the same thing in a very digestible manner. A person who comes across as very brash and, in your face cannot stay popular for very long. The people who are popular are those who are able to tell the truth, but who are able to tell it in a manner that is digestible and acceptable to people. Because if somebody is telling a lot of lies in a very sweet manner, it won't sustain. Somebody who is telling the truth but in a very bold and in a rash manner, that also will not sustain. So this optimum blend of honesty and gentleness is what will sustain in public life. That is what Puttanna Chetty had in great quantity. When we read these episodes, another thing that comes to mind is the distinction between personal integrity and the integrity of a public figure. So the integrity of a statesman is very different as opposed to integrity of a person. At a personal level, we can be kind, we can have empathy, we can be generous, we can be forgiving. But as a leader, as a country, we cannot. In fact, even recently, when this episode happened of the Israel killing the leader of Hamas, I was discussing with a friend, and I said, this is a very good thing. And he said, why is it wrong? Is it not wrong to have this kind of vengeance? Shouldn't we forgive our enemies? So then that's why I told him that great individuals will forgive their enemies. great nations will never forgive their enemies. This is very, very important. So at an individual level, we can have all sorts of great values and integrity. But as a statesman, the moment I become a leader of an organization, I become a head of a family, I become a head of a state, any of these things, then I cannot apply the same principles what apply to an individual. In fact, many times I feel this is one of the big failings of Gandhi. He was trying to apply personal standards to a public life, which will never sustain. So there used to, because of Puttanna Chetty was such a, was having such a high position, there will be an assault of supplicants. Somebody will come and ask them, I want this help. He will want some transfer. Somebody want to avoid a transfer. Somebody wants a job. So from morning, you'll have a long list of supplicants. Now, what will happen if he tells them on their face, oh, your demand is unreasonable, it can never be done? Then this person is going to feel, little rattled. He may feel disappointed. He may say something against the person in power. Whereas now, if the demand is actually unreasonable, but if he says, oh, I will make sure it happens, don't worry. If he gives an empty assurance, that is also problematic, because then either he has to do it, in which case it would be harmful for the public, or he will have to say, yes, don't worry, and then not do it, which means he will end up lying. So therefore, what Puttanna Chetty used to do is, always he will say, good, let us see, all right, I will think about it, I will get back to you. Porkalam, Kamraj used to say. In fact, I remember one episode, my guru, L. Subramaniam, used to always talk about Palghat Maniyer, who was one of the legendary Mridangam players, and used to play a lot with Sir. So, one of the characteristic traits of Maniyer, especially after he had reached such a heights, he used to play regularly for Ariyakudi and T.R. Mahalingam, so he was very sought after. And naturally, a Mridangam player has to play accompaniment for somebody. It's not like he can become a soloist. So he will play accompaniment only to selected people. He would not play if there is a mic. He had certain, standards for himself. But a lot of people will come and ask, Mama, you should play with me. I'm a big fan of this thing. And every time he will never disappoint anybody. He will always say, let me think about it. Parkram. யோசிச்சு சொல்றேன், I will think about it and tell you, let me get back to you, which basically means no way. That's what he is saying. But he will not directly tell somebody, he will say, let me think about it, I'll get back to you on this. And unless he's really convinced, he won't play. But he won't want to disappoint somebody when they come to the house. Usually they will come in the house with some tambulam or some fruits and everything. They have put so much of effort. Least courtesy we can do is we can be kind and friendly with them and say, let me think about it, I'll get back to you. I can't promise anything, but I will get back to you. This kind of tact is very important, especially if you are in public life. If you are an individual, then it's a different story. So like this, because of this nature, he never made any false promises. Then there is a beautiful description about Puttanna Chetty's house in Chamarajpet. He had a house on the 5th Street, a beautiful, large, expansive house with lawn all over. And outside there was a lot of beautiful trees, like Sampige, cannonball, padri trees, and the Jaji, Mallige, different flowering plants. Then there was a Baitak hall, assembly building kind of place. Then behind that there was a kitchen and a garage, and then there was the main house. There was walkways on all 4 sides next to the compound walls, and Puttanna Chetty would go for his daily walk. And DVG describes the 3 or 4 kinds of people who would visit Puttanna Chetty on a daily basis. Out of 100 people, about 50% of them are the first kind, where they will come, either join him for the morning walk and explain what they want to say or put the petition, and they will be in the outer perimeter of the house. Then out of the remaining 50, about 30 of them would come and sit in the veranda of the Baitak building. So they had little more intimacy with Puttanna Chetty, so they would come and sit down there and discuss certain things. Then there will be about 5 or 10 people who will cross the veranda and enter the living room of the house. So these are the people who are even more intimate with him, who know him for a long time and so on. And rarer class included about 4 or 5 people who would enter the inner room and discuss matters privately. So like this, there are different layers of thing. Visitors had the designated spaces. But everybody was regarded with great respect. Everybody was attended to. Just because somebody was outside and they are in that outer circle doesn't mean they were looked down upon. Each of them had respect. And in a very subtle manner, his DVG says, in Puttanna Chetty's house, there was no grandeur like Sheshadri Iyer's house. And similarly, there was no congestion like in Anand Rao's place. It was a junction of contentment and joy and convenience. Now, I had mentioned about the scholarship of Puttanna Chetty. Now, he was not educated, very highly educated in the traditional sense, in the formal sense. In fact, DVG himself is not very educated. He's a 10th standard fail. And he says, it might turn out to be presumptuous if somebody like me who has not passed any exams tries to answer this question of whether Puttanna Chetty was a scholar or not. Now, he had not passed any examinations. He had no desire to call himself a scholar. But just to talk about his understanding of things, DVG gives an episode. During the First World War, 1915, there was one group of British soldiers called the Territorials. The Territorial Army was largely made up of highly educated people who became soldiers primarily because of the patriotic duty. So the kind of patriotism we also saw in some of, like in Israel and few other countries, where the country is at war, even though they are, doing something very successfully in some other country, they come back to their home country to fight for the motherland. So that kind of a sentiment was driving these territorials. And these are all people educated in Oxford and Cambridge and all that. But they were staying in Bangalore at that time. So the British resident of that time, Hugh Daly, felt that it will be very beneficial if they could listen to some of the wise thinkers of the local, state where they are positioned and learn about India. So that was his idea. And therefore, he requested Puttanna Chetty to speak about the administration and history of the Mysore state. This was the topic given to him. And the topic was, this was a topic, and the lecture was supposed to be for 45 minutes. It should not be very long, because it should be something which is digestible to the soldiers. And Puttanna Chetty agreed to this, and he was, going to get prepared for the speech. And one day he got a call. He called DVG, and DVG said, I'll go to his place, and he lands up at Chamarajpet 5th Street. And Puttanna Chetty invites him and he says, I'm supposed to give a lecture on this topic, so I'm going to prepare some notes for my lecture. I would like you to have a look at it. So DVG was made to sit in the veranda. Puttanna Chetty was sitting inside his room on his desk, and on the verso side of the calendar, he would not waste, he won't take a fresh leaf of paper. On the other side of an old calendar, he would write some notes and then pass it on. After the page is over, he'll pass it on to DVG, and DVG would go through and give any feedback. And like this, the entire speech was, the notes for the speech was written, and DVG went through it and gave his feedback. And at that point of time, in the process of going through this, what Puttanna Chetty had prepared, DVG admires his remarkable ability to succinctly present all the ideas, because this is a huge topic. The administration and history of Mysore state is a huge topic. You can write an entire book about it. And people like Hayavardhan Rao and all have written extensively about it. In fact, he was also a good friend of Puttanna Chetty. But offhand, sitting at a desk with just a piece of paper and a pen, he was able to make notes which are relevant, and that is the time DVG is amazed at the lucidity and the clarity of thought of this man. So when he said, if somebody can write with such authenticity and cover such a broad topic in 1 hour, then definitely we should call him a scholar. There is no other term for such a person. Puttanna Chetty was very well known for his charities. He was also in charge of many charities, in fact. So once probably almost at the later part of his life when he was 80 plus, he called DVG and he said, I'm getting old and I don't have any other great ambitions, and I want to devote whatever time and money, whatever I have for larger good. God has been very kind to me. So I've given a part of my wealth to Victoria Hospital for its development, and also, he has given towards the town hall later, which took his name. So then he had a plan of building a hostel for students. And he asked DVG, what is your opinion? So he says it is a hostel which should be open to all Hindus. And it should house Brahmanas, maybe 15 to 20 Brahmanas at least. It should also house Lingayatas. And it's all right even if their strength is more. But I want it to be open to all Hindu people. What is your idea? How does this plan sound? So DVG is very, very excited. He says, it's a large-hearted thought, such a noble idea you have. It demonstrates your vision, your far-sightedness, in addition to your generosity. It's very, very admirable. I'm all for it. So then he said, good, very good. This is just at the early stage. I have not worked out the details. So I will consult with a couple of more people and get back to you. And about a month later, he met DVG somewhere and he says, what, that plan doesn't seem to be materializing. I think I don't have support for it. So my reading from this is probably his family and his close associates did not support this idea of a cosmopolitan hostel. So he says, I will be building a hostel, but it will be exclusively for Lingayatas, which is the Veerashaiva community from which he was also a member. So he says, even so, this is what has happened now. I will be, building a hostel only for Veerashaiva community, but I have not given up the thought of a cosmopolitan hostel. Someday I want to make it happen. I think it will be good if this thing happens. And the hostel which he established even now is there, the Veerashaiva student hostel on this very road, Bull Temple Road. And it was inaugurated, and Mirza Ismail came, and he was there at the inauguration. He was the president, and a lot of lectures happened. Within a few months, I think at the age of 82, Puttanna Chetty passed away. So he had that vision, and probably the people around him did not support it. And this is also later when DVG visits him once when he's old, maybe around the same time. He expresses his frustration with some of the people he was with. So maybe that was one of the reasons. At the end of this episode, DVG has very nicely summed up some of the accomplishments of Puttanna Chetty in his public life. So he was responsible for the Mysore Bank in a big way. He supported the Mysore Krishnarajendra Mills, one of the major supporters of the Kannada Sahitya Parishad. And he was, like I said, in charge of several charities like the Gubbi Totadappa charities, the RBNMS, the Rai Bahadur Arcot, Narayana Swami Mudalayar's educational charities, and so on. He was in the Veerashaiva conference. He was also, I think, presided over the All India Veerashaiva Mahasabha as early as, for a period of almost 20 years. And also he was a benefactor to ADA, the Amateur Dramatic Association, and a lot of public offices he held, and each one of them he has been successfully he served. Another interesting thing about him was he was highly respected by people from all communities. So if there was any sort of dispute between two major communities or two major factions, he would become the de facto arbitrator, because both factions, like if there was a communal clash, Hindus and Muslims, both would say, let us go to Puttanna Chetty. We will do as he says, because both of them had regard for his word. So in this manner, there's the life of Puttanna Chetty spread over 82 years was a remarkable life of supporting people of all walks of life, and he was also knighted by the British government. Whenever DVG talks about a major personality, along with that there are smaller other sub-personalities that come in. So it is never about one person exclusively. I mean, there are few episodes where exclusively about one person, but invariably he will have some references to few other people. Even when he's talking about Shivapiche Mudaliyar, he will talk about some Vakulabharanam Paradeshi or some other person. If he's talking about some Ramasheshaya, he will talk about some other episode. So even though it is a small, short episode about one individual, invariably the name of one or two more people will come in. So a prominent figure who features in this episode on Puttanna Chetty is Dr. R. Subbarao, who was the health inspector. He was in the health department. And he was, and the reference what DVG makes is that Puttanna Chetty was very good in picking his assistants. And one of the most notable assistants he had was Dr. R. Subbarao. He was an MBBS and he was in the health department. And his younger brother was the chief secretary of the Mysore government, R. Rangarao. And Subbarao was, as the health officer, he was responsible in a big way to kind of cut down the cases of influenza in the years 1918, 19, and there was a big bout of influenza. So he was responsible for spreading, all the medicines. There was a particular kind of ajwain tonic which was used, what we call omam, or the bishop's weed. So they were carrying the medicines and going all over the city. And DVG also was involved with that. When he was working in the Karnataka, he would go with Subbarao and people like P. Kodan Rao and B.K. Ram Prasad, K.S. Krishnayar and DVG. All these people would go and during 1917, 1918 to curb the spread of influenza. And because of his efforts, so many people's lives were saved. In fact, one of the very heart-rending episodes is narrated by DVG. They used to go around all the places to check everybody is doing well, is anybody unwell, and so on. During one of the tours, they saw a young 3-year-old child just playing by itself outside a house. And they asked the child, who is there, what's your name? Nothing. The child is very young, he doesn't know what's happening, is blissfully playing. And on a hunch, they enter the house to see a man almost, on his deathbed. He says, just don't worry about me. You please take care of my wife who's lying there. At least for the sake of the baby, you please save the mother. Don't worry about me. And when they go to the other side of the room, they find that his wife is dead long back. This he has not even realized. And he also died after a couple of days. So this was the kind of situation and the times during which people like Subbarao worked very selflessly and supported the society. Then he also established a cooperative society for the lower ranked employees of the municipality. And I had mentioned earlier once when I was talking about M.G. Varadacharya, I think I had mentioned this, where DVG and Varadacharya used to go to some of the leprosy patients, and every Yugadi and Deepavali used to go and give some, food and clothes and things like that. And they continued for some time, Varadacharya and DVG, but that was taken over by Subbarao, who long after that he continued working on this. So therefore the support of Puttanna Chetty and the work of Subbarao was very, very, had a great social impact in those days. The next episode, DVG talks about 3 public figures. Although they may not be very well known to the larger public, these people have worked very sincerely in whatever position they work. Because many times we see that people like poets and musicians, actors, they are able to reach a much larger group of people. We know about their existence, we appreciate their work, and we are direct beneficiaries of their art. Whereas there are so many government officials, bank officers, and engineers, and lawyers, and doctors, so many people who are working silently for public good, but we never know about them. So unless people like DVG who have that vision write about them, for large, in good measure, we would never know about people like Govinda Raghava Iyer or Shankar Narayana Rao and people like that. So one notable advocate was Shankar Narayana Rao, who was from Shimoga. He and Balakrishna Rao were kind of like the Ashwini Devatas of Shimoga. They were very close friends. And he writes about some episodes related to Shankar Narayana Rao. But one thing which is very interesting, which I think will be worthwhile to narrate, is that during the years 38, 39, there was, this was kind of the beginning of the Second World War, right? And there was a fear among the residents of Bangalore. The German military ship Emden was sighted near the coast of Madras, and it was potentially harmful for the country, and everybody knew about the method of attack of the Germans. Nobody knew what to expect. So anything can happen, so their people were a little scared. Now in Bangalore, there was a group of people along with the DVG who said we must have a Praja Atma Rakshana Samiti, a citizens group for self-defense. The whole idea was there will be a few people every night who will patrol the area, and this needed not only volunteers but also a little bit of funds, like you need a staff, you need a lantern, little bit tea and coffee for the people. They, late night they will be going around, so a little bit of thing to keep them awake, and these things needed some funds. So accordingly, DVG and his friends drafted beautiful letters and sent it to all the eminent people. Little bit of donation to meet the expenses, and one youth from every household to join the patrol group. So if somebody can come forward and join us, it will be very nice. So this was sent to Shankarnarayana Rao, it was sent to many other people. But nobody replied to this letter. After 2 weeks, 3 weeks, of course, not like today, right? Today, if you send a message, you expect a reply in 10 seconds. If he has not seen after 1 minute in WhatsApp, oh my God, what is happening? Something's not okay. And after 1 hour, if they have not replied, that means they have something majorly wrong, right? It's not, in those days, people would wait. So they waited for 2-3 weeks, and even after 2-3 weeks, they didn't hear back. And the young boys were getting very agitated, and they told DVG, what is this, sir? You are saying they're all great men and noble people and that and this. Fellows have not replied. What is so great about them? If they can't join hands with us on this kind of work, what greatness you are talking about? And they were losing their patience. 1 month after the letter was dispatched, he finally received a reply. This is the first reply he must have received. And it was from Shankarnarayana Rao. And the letter read that I was not in town when your letter arrived at my doorstep. I came back yesterday and I saw the letter. I am replying now. Kindly pardon the delay. What you have planned is very essential today, and what you have ventured to undertake is commendable. I am attaching a check with this letter. Please accept my donation. Use it for your expenses. You should not stop this good work because of lack of funds. If you need more money, please tell me. And I have asked my son to join the patrol team. And if you want me also to join the patrol team, I am happy to do that. Whatever help you want, don't hesitate to ask me. So a public figure, a great advocate, and a person notable to write this kind of a letter to DVG shows the magnanimity and the caliber of the person. So it is very easy to write a check. Even that is not easy, but even among the various ways in which we can do charity, there is a term we say checkbook charity. That is the easiest form of charity. Of the many ways to do charity, we write a check. Oh yes, okay, you are doing good work, yes, write a check. But the very difficult kind of charity is where we get involved. We go and dirty our hands, work in the mud. That is the real difficulty. Because many times I myself have faced this. Whenever I approach somebody for help or some support, they say, oh, please let me know you're doing good work. How can I support you? I will financially support. I'm like, I don't want financial support. I want you to translate this article for me. I want you to write a book for me. I want you to do study. So it is easy. There are many people who are sitting in US and UK and Europe who are very happy. Oh, ನೀವೆಲ್ಲ ತುಂಬಾ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀರಪ್ಪ, ಒಂದು ದುಡ್ಡು ಕಳಿಸ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀನಿ. So that money is important, but what is even more difficult is to get the right people to work in the area. So many things need to be done in any field. Now, because I am in the field of publication, I am looking at it from one point of view. But in any field of nation building, so many things are there to be done. So the real charity is involving in the activity, and which we see exemplified in Shankarnarayana Rao. Then Balakrishna Rao was also a brilliant lawyer and a very close friend of Shankarnarayana Rao. And during 1913-14, when Vishvesharaya was a Diwan, he had made a committee to study the financial situation of the province and come up with some kind of recommendations to cut down the expenses and plan the finance better. One of the members of the committee was Balakrishna Rao. And in this episode, a short, maybe couple of pages, DVG explains the method of working of Balakrishna Rao. So he would look at all the various sides of the situation, and this was a method that would have really been appreciated by a man like Gopal Krishna Gokhale, DVG writes. So it is not about having a certain opinion, already fixed view on certain thing, and go there to the committee and try to force that view down somebody else's throat. It was a method of trying to understand the details, go into all the details, look at it from different points of view. If we do this, will it have some other repercussion? If we do that, will it have a totally different set of repercussions? These are very important. So, for example, even recently I was discussing with somebody about this idea of meritocracy. And they were telling me that, meritocracy means it is very disadvantageous to people who do not have the wherewithal to go to the next level if they are backward in terms of, certain educational thing, they will not come to the top and so on. But then when we see what is the alternative, okay, if let us say meritocracy may be not the best way, what is the alternative? Around the world we see wherever there is no meritocracy, either there is anarchy, or there is dictatorship, or there is nepotism, or something really obnoxious, which when we see all these other options, meritocracy seems like the best. It may not be ideal, but it is the best of the different things available. So like this, the manner in which Balakrishna Rao used to study all the various topics and understand the details before giving a suggestion is very noteworthy, and has been captured here. And the third public figure he talks about was Vasudeva Rao, who was a coffee planter from Chikmagalur, and the government appointed Vasudeva Rao as a chairman of the municipal council in Chikmagalur. And that led to a lot of problem because Vasudeva Rao was very, very honest. So the moment he assumed power as the chairman of the municipal council, he tried to tighten the administration. So he looked at all the municipal councillors who were evading taxes, then the eminent people who had made illegal property, who had accumulated money in a wrong way, and he investigated all these cases and tried to take action. So within 6 to 8 months, he became hugely unpopular. And DVG writes, the episode stands as one of the best examples of how people react if their leader is responsible, honest, and ruthlessly uncompromising. So there is also danger if their leader is honest to a lot of people. Then there is a small episode about Abbas Khan Saab, who was a person who was responsible for the Central Mohammedan Association. Along with Nawab Ghulam Ahmad Kalami, he built the Central Mohammedan Association. And although he was a very affectionate person, he knew DVG very well. Because of the Sultanpet Ganapati riots, his name was a little tarnished. Of course, I think we had discussed earlier also about the Ganapati Galabhe of 1928 when I spoke about Mirza Ismail. It was one of the unfortunate episodes during the rule of the Maharaja. And when we look at the larger span of 60 years that DVG writes about in Diwans of Mysore, this stands out like a sore thumb. Although there were other Ashwatthakatte riots and few other things that happened, the Ganapati Galabhe takes a very, very important place, and it shows the certain shortcomings of that era. However, DVG has very nice things to say about Abbas Khan as well, and he was also along with DVG in certain committees, and he spoke very good Kannada and English and so forth. Next, DVG speaks about Magadi Karanika Krishnamurti, a very, very interesting character. Magadi Karanika Krishnamurti was from a very illustrious family. The Karanikas are descendants of a minister of the famous Kempegowda. And this chieftain seemed to have donated a lot of land and gold to this minister. And Krishnamurti's ancestors were very virtuous and wealthy. They were also great patrons of the Vedas and the various Shastras. And a lot of Pandits and scholars lived under their patronage. And even now, I think the Karanika Pathshala is there. Karanik Road we have in Basavangudi. Magadi Krishnamurti was also a person who tried to live up to that heritage, and he also supported these kind of activities. He was a very well-built person. He had a very tall and well-nourished body. Once he even participated in a kind of display of physical strength in the Mysore Samsthana. It was conducted by the Maharaja of Mysore in the Gymkhana club. So there, one of the, the banana tree which was kept as a decoration, he lifted it up and he was wielding it like a gada, like a mace. So other people who were participants, they got scared and they ran away from the place. That was the kind of strength he had. By around 1907-08, Krishnamurti became interested in public affairs and started working with, different people. And he was one of the first people to build a house in Baswangudi, because Baswangudi was a newly created locality at that time. If you probably are familiar, that before the disastrous plague which hit Bengaluru in the late part of the 19th century, it was mostly the Pete area, Chickpet and Doddapet and Badepet, Aralipet, that, and then Halasuru. Those were the old parts of Bangalore. When the plague hit the city, they had to create newer localities so that they could keep everybody there and try to stem the further spread of the disease. That is when places like Malleshwaram and Baswangudi were created, and subsequently Rajajanagar and so on. And even today, that's why you see in Malleshwaram and Baswangudi and Chamarajpet, lot of conservancy lanes. Those were the small lanes where they would take the dead body of the plague infected people. So that's the reason you have the conservancy lanes. So Magadi Karnika Krishnamurti was one of the first people to build a house in Baswangudi. He was very convinced that agriculture is very important for the future of the country, and modern machinery is very much necessary for agriculture. So he had had a huge house, and in the front portion of the house, he invested a lot of money, and he corresponded with several foreign companies, and he got plows and new types of weeding machines, the machines for seeding and harvesting machines, the machines for crushing the unburnt bricks, then dehusking machines and cotton seed separators, new types of shovels, different kinds of spades and sickles and all these things. And he had given advertisements in various magazines that all these are available, and please, you should come and buy this. It is good for agriculture and so on. DVG says, even as a student, I remember seeing these advertisements. The people who visited the exhibition were very few. Although he had tried to do all this thing, people who attended this was very few. And when his friends were jobless, they had nothing better to do, they will come and they will just see the exhibits from a distance, and they will giggle, and with a muffled laughter they will say, "Oh, you have put lot of efforts for doing all these things, you are a fantastic guy, some magic is there, sir, in this place, amazing." But nothing beyond that. So there was no loss for them, no gain for him. This is what DVG writes. So it is he tried this for a few years, but finally when nobody bought anything, he had to shut down everything, and he was disappointed because some of the exhibits started disappearing because somebody would have just taken it and gone. So he was very disappointed and he gave it up. And this is the experience of people who try to herald progress, is what DVG writes. So always when you have a new idea, you want to make some new changes, you are able to see the benefit, but you are not able to make the other people see it. Not everybody can see the benefit. And initially, always there is a opposition. Once there is a critical mass, then suddenly everybody start using it to the point that you even forget how it was before such a thing existed. A classic case being that of mobile phones and television and all that, right? So before the mobile phones, now it was, it's too expensive, it is 15 rupees to receive a call, why do we need mobile phone and so on. But once the critical mass came, now everybody has a mobile phone, everybody has a smartphone, everybody has a QR code. So now it is become so ubiquitous. But people who are heralding that in the beginning, it is a difficult thing for them. And all through his life, we see Krishnamurti had several brilliant ideas, but all of them were either misplaced or it was too early for its time. Members of the Legislative Assembly used to come to Mysore from all over the state, and they would come and they have these meetings. Krishnamurti had another idea. He said, they all come on behalf of the people, they spend public money. So what is the use if they just come once or twice and they just discuss in the assembly and go away? So they should have an in-depth understanding, and they should know their duties. They should also know what the other members are doing. So therefore, all the members should work in an organized way. So therefore, he said we should have a camp in the Nanjaraja Bahadur Chowdhury, and we should have an organized brainstorming of all the legislative assembly members. And DVG also had gone, and several dignitaries had gathered. Venkate Krishna was there, the advocate Nanjappa was there. So many people had gathered together, and DVG was interested to go and understand what's happening and to meet some of the eminent people. More than the actual discussions, people were interested in what food they were serving, whether it is sajjige or bonda or something, and especially when it is free, then it is even more tastier. At the end of the day, all this money was spent by Magadi Krishnamurti because it is his idea. Who asked him to call all the people? It was his great idea to bring together the people and say, we should do this brainstorming. We should think about what other people are doing. We should work together for the state. All this thing was his idea. But at the end of the day, what happened? He spent a lot of money and people ate a lot of nice food free of cost, and they had a gala time. We see this so many times, even when we were discussing about Vishweshwaraya, if you remember, this was a very, we see in so many times in Vishweshwaraya's life also, that when there is some jatre, let us go and give some education about different things, and they are more interested about some Tagara Yuddha, ram fight. So then the people are not going to listen to this kind of thing. The interest that people have to elevate themselves is not very widespread. This, lot of people, even today, it's very difficult. There is always a group of people who are hell-bent on trying to raise the standards, and there is another group of people who are not willing to raise the standards. So this is constantly there, and we have experienced this firsthand so many times, that we should do this for larger good, and we will try to bring together these great people. And at the end of the day, you won't have the required response. I'll tell you an episode which I faced myself. I don't want to use any names, but there's a certain place which is a hostel for some of the underprivileged kids. And my mother wanted to support this hostel for underprivileged kids in her father's name, and had gone to give the check, and they were very happy. And then I said, sir, it is not enough, this checkbook charity, like I said. I said, it's easy. My mother, every year she gives some money, that to give it to you, it's not a big problem. But I would like to, do some other activities. I have some friends, they're all very good scholars. We will arrange a lecture for, by some of them. Let all the students in the hostel, once a month we can arrange something. And, I gave all the plan. Then he said, sir, it's all very noble. We had already tried this and burnt our fingers. Once we called a great scholar who was Kannada scholar, and even the boys and the girls in the hostel, they themselves did not attend the thing in full numbers. So then we had to cut a sorry figure, so a great person came. He said, how many people are there in the hostel? And only 10% of them showed up. So we have learned the lesson the hard way. We don't want this kind of thing. Even the money, we have already a lot of money. So you don't feel obliged to give the thing, because now, even though we are giving money, students don't want to stay in the hostel because they want to stay in a PG. They don't want to abide by the rules. So like this, there are always people who are trying. We may want to do something, but it may not always be successful because the larger public. But Magadi Karnika Krishnamurti was not a man to give up. Again and again, he tried a lot of these kind of things, and invariably it would land up in a similar kind of end. So when he was in the Legislative Council, he said we should have some sort of a debate and discussion, Whenever he wanted to bring up something, then some people will say, oh, I will just be back, sir. It's a little cold. I think some hot coffee will be good. I will come back after a coffee. So like this, with the time will just go away. And finally, Magadi Krishnamurti only ended up bearing the cost of all these expenses, but he never got really what he was looking at. Then DVG writes about the manner in which the municipal council meetings would go about. Puttanna Chetty was known for his very polished way of speaking, very soft-spoken, and he will speak the truth in a very soft way. But Magadi Krishnamurthy was very brash and in your face. He would be very, very forceful. So it would be a contrast, and we can see that DVG as a young person, he's observing all these things. He's able to see that this is one way of doing it, this is another way of doing it, and there is a contrast. He recalls an episode of some water distribution problem in Bangalore. One of the councillors, Usman Khan, he stood up and he said, "Sir, there is one community, they come to the public tap, they wash their clothes again and again, they clean their vessels repeatedly, they scrub their bodies ad infinitum, and so on." By the time he was finished saying what he was saying, Krishnamurthy got up and became very angry. He rolled up his coat sleeves as if he's going to, get into a fist fight. He says, "Sir, you are talking about the Brahmana community, right? You are pointing fingers at us. What do you mean to say?" By the time Puttanna Chetty said, wait, let us try to understand what he's saying. Did you imply that Brahmanas were the people who are using a lot of water? He says, "No, sir, you please come to my shop and you see my ledger. All the people who buy from my shop are Brahmanas only. Why will I point at their, try to pinpoint at them?" So like this, there would be a fight, and finally ended in great laughter. Again, Krishnamurthy, he was full of ideas, something or other you have to do. So then he was like, this Brahmana community, it's very difficult to get employment. They should do something new. You see, nowadays these Brahmanas have opened hotels. It's very successful. That was the time when I think KP Puttanna and the Hindu Coffee Club, all this thing had started, which we will look at in the 7th volume. So therefore, selling of food is prohibited for Brahmanas in the scriptures, but they are doing that now. So it is impossible now if we put all the old rules for them. So therefore, you should also start having a saloon. You should have a board which says Brahmin saloon. So therefore, why when a Brahmana can cook food and feed somebody, why can't he have a saloon? So then it can be exclusively for Brahmanas. Then we can have exclusive one for widows. So like this, he had all this kind of thing, and then people of course ridiculed him, but he was always full of ideas. And finally, in the last, he talks about a time when he had gone to Magadi to do some dealing of land or something. He got beaten up by a couple of thugs, and apparently they said that, our man is the Diwan, which is meaning Mirza Ismail. So therefore, beat up this fellow. And when Mirza came to see him, he said, "See, this is what is happening, sir. Your people are doing this kind of thing." Despite all this, we see that Krishnamurthy was a very pious man. He respected tradition, and he went to Badrinath for a pilgrimage. When he came back, he said, "I have seen the Badrinath, and I have done all whatever I have to do." And he distributed all his assets to different people. And the Karnika Krishnamurthy Veda Patashala, which I think even now it's running. So this is all because of the support that Magadi Krishnamurthy gave. In fact, even in one of the older episodes, he talks about during a budget speech, Krishnamurthy refers to the Kachit Sarga of the Ramayana and talks about increasing the income, reducing the expenditure, and so on. But even there, he was quoting all these eloquent passages from Ramayana. It was met with some kind of muffled laughter and giggles by the people. They were not able to appreciate what he was saying. The 10th episode of the 6th volume is about a few public institutions. In the first volume, DVG had spoken about some of the political institutions that were created. Here he talks about some of the socio-cultural institutions and organizations. Of them, primarily he talks about two. One is the Ranade Society, and the other is the Mitra Sangha, or the Friends Union. The Ranade Society was probably started by DV Subrayappa and some of his friends, and this was basically society founded in the memory of Mahadev Govind Ranade, who was a judge, and he was a great scholar and a social reformer and a writer. And two of his prominent disciples were Gopal Krishna Gokhale and Sir M. Vishweswaraya. So this was his caliber, and he was very, very famous at that point of time, and he was a judge in the Bombay High Court. More important than his profession, he was a great patriot he was a kind of a patriot philosopher. So all the time he would be thinking about ideas like what are the transformations that should occur in the life of our countrymen, what service can India render to the whole world, what can we do as Indians. This was a kind of ideas that he was always thinking about, and he used to deliberate on such topics, he used to discuss with people, he used to give very realistic suggestions to all kinds of people. So Subrayappa started this, and his friends started this in honor of Rana Day. There again, taking this as a segue into another personality, DVG writes a little bit about Subrayappa and the kind of wide-ranging contacts he had in Bombay. And during the 1918 session of the Congress, the special session of the Congress, DVG also had gone, and he was particularly interested to talk about the Indian princely states. And in a bid to get some support for his presentation, he wanted to meet certain people. That is when he realized how well connected Subrayappa was in Bombay. And he was able to take DVG to meet several people to garner some support for his, his presentation at the session. Another person of the Rana Day Society was Ramachandra Shastri, and there were also Belur Srinivasa Iyengar and Mokshagundam Krishnamurti and so on. After about 5 or 6 years, the Rana Day Society disappeared. So again, when we see some of these episodes, this keeps recurring all through in society. There was, it appears the society had collected 500 or 600 rupees by enacting a play. So 500-600 rupees in those days was a huge sum of money. You can imagine almost 100 years back, right? So 600 rupees was collected. At that time, a certain member of the society had an opportunity to travel abroad. And he happened to be the treasurer of the society, and the money was in his custody. And in his hurry to travel, owing to his forgetfulness, he took the money and went away without informing anybody. So DVG in the original, he says, Maravininda. So which can either mean owing to his forgetfulness, or Marevu also means some kind of veil, so by means of concealment. So he doesn't directly say this person did something wrong. At the same time, he is not giving a clean chit. This person went away without informing, and the money is nowhere to be seen. And he came back about 5 or 6 years later. By this time, everybody had forgotten about it. Nobody had maintained any ledgers, and this was closed down. After a couple of years of the folding of the Rana Day Society, then Subrayappa started a trading mart called Rana Day Company, and he ran that for some time. Then, as the Rana Day Society diminished in popularity, around that time, the Mitra Sangha or the Friends Union came together. So it had people like L. Swami Rao and L. Ramarao, K.T. Bhashyam, and certain Mustafa. So all these people were interested, I think, in literature and so on. So every Saturday or Sunday, this union will convene, the Friends Union. The topic would be like English literature mostly, sometimes Sanskrit literature, then episodes from international history and lives of great personality. Some of the European scholars also would come and give lectures, and people like J.C. Chakravarti, K. Krishna Iyengar, M.G. Varadacharya, K. Ramchandra Rao, all these prominent people would either come to give a lecture or would be invited to preside over the assembly and so on. And the Friends Union had made such a good name that people would come 15 or 20 minutes before the start of the program just so that they could occupy the front seats. Then they used to organize Kalidasa Day or Shakespeare Day or Shelley Day, like this a particular day devoted to the works of a certain poet, certain literature. I think it's a great idea. Even now, if anybody is interested to do these kind of things, it is really valuable. And when we read about these episodes, sometimes I feel they would have done this for 4 years, 5 years. After that time, DVG writes, different people spread 3-4 years because they either got different jobs, they got a transfer, or the enthusiasm came down, or people had to family responsibilities, for whatever reasons, 3-4 years down the line it stopped. However, I feel even if you are able to do it for 3 years or 4 years, it has great value. It has a great culturing and refinement, because somebody who is a member of a group like this, who has studied some of the great classics of Sanskrit literature or Kannada literature for 4 years, in their own life, when they grow up, they will have certain connoisseurship. They will impart that to their children. They'll be good patrons of literature. They'll be good patrons of the arts. So it is, I think, really valuable if, even if it is so simple today, we have all the technology, we have easy access to all the literature. Even in a small apartment complex, if there are some 300 apartments in so many of these big places, you identify 5 people or 4 people who have similar interests. You can meet once a week, twice a week, and I'm sure there are already people doing that. Many people do that in these gated communities, and where people, because proximity is very important. Those days we find a lot of these people were all living in Chamarajpet, Baswangudi. Proximity played a very important role. So if we do this, it has so much of advantage to improve our standard, because the mainstream education, the mainstream newspaper and media, they don't focus about classical literature at all. So it is a responsibility of the people to take it up and do it, I feel. So there DVG talks about the public institutions and how it finally kind of went out of the, faded away. And it's important that the prominent people of the town are also involved in these kind of activities. That is also one of the things which keeps it going, because it is just a small group of people who are like-minded. It may sustain for some time, but every now and then when you get a prominent person to preside over your meetings or address the audience, that keeps it, that's also something which we see in the public institutions. Not only is it important to have this kind of gatherings, it is also important to record it, which DVG has done. When he talks about public institutions, the political institutions, and here next he discusses some of the Bhajan organizations of Bangalore. Now, in about 100-120 years back, one of the very, very important pastimes of people was to attend Bhajana mandalis, Bhajana mandiras. Today we have television, we have OTT, and so many ways for so many channels for entertainment. But earlier it would either be going to a temple in the evening, attending a bhajana karakrama, or it would be attending a play or a music concert or a dance program. So primarily, and it was not very common to have, especially the great singers of that time, to have concerts. It would be only like in the Ram Seva Mandali or some specific times they would have big singers to come and sing. But what was very common was the stage plays and the bhajana mandalis. Some patrons like Sahuji, one of the very great patron of that time, on his rooftop there would be concerts by people like Bengaluru Nagaratnamma, Vinay Sheshanna, Mysore Vasudevacharya, Bidaram Krishnappa, and so on. Some of the music rasikas together came to create this Sanmarga Pravartaka Sabha, which was again the official address was the terrace of Sahuji. The primary people were employed at Divan's office. So Bhagavata Narasimharaja, Narayan Rao, who was a relative of B.M. Shri, then J. Srinivasaya, Ganjam Gundappa, then Bidare Ashwath Narayana Shastri, who later, I think, committed suicide after killing his family. This is an episode which comes in Puttanna Chetty when you're talking about Puttanna Chetty's episode. So like this, so many people, they would celebrate Ramotsava, they would celebrate Janmashtami, they would honor some sadhus and sannyasis. They would be... some of the sannyasis would come from other places, and those days there is, they all used to stay in the house of some devotee. Like the Kudali Matha sadhu would typically stay in KP Puttanna's house, the one who ran the Hindu Coffee Club. So one of the disciples of this Swamiji was also a member of the Sanmarga Pravartaka Sabha. They would conduct so many programs, and similarly there is a Sita Rama Mandira, which is another organization. Of course, a lot of details about the past can be found in this episode. What is interesting about memorable in this particular episode is the story of the Srinivasa Brahmananda Deshika Swamiji, who became very prominent. This man had come from Tamil Nadu. He was very good orator in Tamil. Not a great singer, but he was very tall and well-built and a very hefty man, very good physical stature. And it was B.V. Lakshman Rao who was working in the Divan's office as a superintendent, who was a great patron and shishya of this Srinivasa Brahmananda Deshika Swamiji. And they would have some programs every now and then, and he would perform Harikatha. There would be some musical kirtanas, and the Swamiji would sing. He was not a very great singer, like DVG has said, so he will sing the Pallavi line, the opening stanza, and the complete rest of the composition would be sung by some Nanjunda Shastri or some other person, so that it will become musically very rich. In the middle of a Harikatha performance, once this Srinivasa Swamiji sang a Churnika. So Churnika is a kind of Gadya and Padya mixed together, which is like a short piece which is sung in the middle. In fact, DVG writes that in our new and civilized literary flood, the Churnika is one of the arts that has been washed away. So it is a simple a couple of lines. Many, even now, some here and there we find during the meals, somebody will sing a small line, or in the middle of some, when there is a little bit of respite in the rituals, somebody will sing a couple of lines. So he sang some Churnika in Sanskrit, which had all the names, the 24 names of Mahavishnu. And by the time he was singing the Churnika, he raised his voice to such a pitch, and then almost went into a trance, and he just almost fell down. They had to be taken away. Then he had to, after recovering, he again came back, and so on. And now, because the Swamiji went into the divine trance, more and more people started coming. Then one day, he became so famous, his name grew. He had a divine message that, oh, I should start a magazine. So this is a divine message he got. Well, I should start the magazine. And it was called Message of the Vedanta or Message of the Bhagavan or something like that. And it was printed in the Navaratna printing press on Arcot Srinivasacharya Street. DVG says he also was responsible for correcting some of the proofs of that magazine. And Ranganna, who was the clerk in the office of the Divan, he was the manager of this magazine. And the magazine ran for about a year, and then there was no information about this Srinivasa Brahmananda Deshika Swamiji is missing. And lot of payments which were due with not being paid, and everybody started hounding this poor Ranganna. What can he do? He is just there, the front end of this whole thing, but he could not do anything, and it this magazine also wound up. The rumor was that the Swamiji has left town. DVG writes, here ends the episode of Srinivasa Brahmananda Deshika Swamiji in Bangalore. He was rendering his pious services elsewhere where there are a lot of devotees. The end of the volume, there are two very nice small episodes. One is the Anamadheya Goshti, the group of non-entities. When, like I had mentioned earlier, that when Dr. R. Subbarao was traveling around Bangalore during the influenza, he was trying to spread the medicine and tell people about how to take care and so on. DVG was also very, very closely working with him and trying to spread this message of public health. One day what happened is a friend of his gave a small cash packet and saying that, this is going to help you in your public activities, all your social work which you are doing. And the amount was something like 2,000 rupees. So 2,000 rupees cash 110 years back or 105 years back, you can imagine. It's almost, like somebody giving maybe 10 lakhs or something today. It's that kind of amount, because it was even a very, very wealthy person would earn about 100 rupees in a month or maybe in a year also. So it is 2,000 rupees, a huge amount of money in those days. You can just imagine. And this person who gave the packet said, you should maintain strict confidentiality. My name cannot come out anywhere. It is very, very important that you don't tell anybody about this, and you use it the way you want. DVG says there are many reasons, maybe because he was a government employee. People may wonder how he got so much of money. How can this man give 2,000 rupees donation? That means he must have much more than that. So many things, possible criticism could be there. Therefore, this man has requested not to reveal the name. Then DVG writes, today that donor and all the friends are no more. except for one person and me, nobody else is alive. So therefore, I think it will not harm anybody if I reveal the name of this person. And that is S.G. Shastri. S.G. Shastri was a renowned scholar in Mysore, and he was also very well known as Soap Shastri because he was the one running the government soap factory. And his grandfather was one Garalapuri Shastri, who was a great scholar. In fact, this S.G. Shastri is also a Garalapuri Shastri, but because it is confusing, S.G. Shastri is younger, and his grandfather Garalapuri Shastri is a senior who was a Vidwan. He was a big name in Mysore. He was in the king's court. And he had written a lot of works in Sanskrit and like both Kavya as well as he had composed some Shastric works. And his son was the Kavitilaka Ayya Shastri. Ayya Shastri's son was S.G. Shastri. And Ayya Shastri also has written this Shesha Ramayana and Vikramor Vishya in Kannada. S.G. Shastri had translated some plays of Ibsen into Kannada, and he also written some short stories and novels. Sometime before this episode took place, S.G. Shastri had taken DVG, told DVG about this Anamadheya Goshti. It was what you can call as non-entities, a group of non-entities or anonymous group, a group without name. Now, what is the reason for this group? So happened that Shastri had gone to England for higher studies. And upon his return to India, he landed a very good job. He was a specialist in chemistry, and he started the soap factory, and he ran it for several years, Sandal Soap Factory. Now, one of the thoughts that came to his mind was that there are a few people like me who have pursued education abroad, who have come back to India, who are doing very well for themselves. They are getting a handsome pay. And it is not impossible for us to join hands together and raise some money for the education of some other people and improve the education sector here. We can support the publication of few of the good books, and we can send some of the younger generation to good institutes for study. And we are indebted to our nation, so is it not our dharma to put our best to repay a little bit of that debt what we owe to the country? This was the thinking of S.G. Shastri. So then he shared this idea with few people, and several notable people of that era, like B.K. Narayan Rao and M.S. Ramachandra Rao and N.N. Iyengar, A. Subbarao, B. Puttaya, Sampath Kumar, and so many people said this is a great idea, and they contributed. So the idea, some people contributed 20 rupees a month, 15 rupees a month, 20, 25 rupees. Some people could only spare 10 rupees. Doesn't matter. They put all this in a pool. And Puttaya would keep a track of all the accounts. And slowly the money started accumulating. And when there was about 1,000, 2,000 rupees that had come together, then slowly some minor disagreements started cropping up. This happens typically when there is no money, everybody is very happy. The moment the money starts flowing in, then slowly all the conflicts start coming. Then they would recommend people for who should get this money for a scholarship. So if somebody recommends a name of a nephew or a niece or somebody like that, they'll say, oh, you are doing nepotism. And that man will argue, but this person also is serving the country. They will also go and do something well for India. Just so happens that they are my nephews or something like that. Like this, they used to have some heated discussions. But of course, time to time, these things also would get sorted out. Then over the course of the time it existed, almost 15 or 20 people were able to get foreign education because of this Anamadheya Goshti. Again, like I said, many times these things start very well and it fizzles out very soon. However, for those 15 or 20 people, it was a life-changing thing. So to that end, all these organizations have great value. Finally, somebody said they want a loan of some money from that pool. We will repay it quickly, and that loan was never repaid. And finally, people had enough. So whatever remaining money was there was given back to the different contributors in the proportion that they had donated to this pool. And people like B.K. Narayan Rao said, I don't want this. You give to Lal Bagh. He donated that money and created a children's play area. Also, the organization was not just to gather funds, but also create some opportunity for scholarly gatherings. Many times we see that DVG has been part of so many such clubs and groups. Although the group is short-lived, he has been part of so many groups that it feels almost like all his life DVG was part of some study circle or the other, study group or the other, with people who are oftentimes people who are older to him and more well known. He was always, trying to be with people and gather the knowledge. We see that. Finally, at the end of the sixth volume, I will take just a few minutes, and there was Veereshalingam Pantulu and Dayaram Gidumal, two venerable individuals. And he has chosen them not because that they have something in common. One was almost like R. Narasimhacharya, what R. Narasimhacharya did to Kannada literature. Veereshalingam Pantulu did to the Telugu literature. He wrote about the history of the Telugu literature. He is also kind of recreated the Vikar of Wakefield in Satyavati Charitre. Then he translated, he did Rajashekara Charitre, which was translated into Kannada later. He wrote Satyarajana Desha Yatregalu, which was translated by Benegal Ramarao into Kannada. And he basically wrote about the history of the Telugu poets. He was very well regarded. And in his later years, he's a great scholar, but later years he started doing a lot of social work. And he was running a, Abalashrama kind of a thing. He was running, taking care of people. And he was also instrumental in performing some widow remarriages. Now, at that point of time, widow remarriage was accepted only in the places where the British were directly ruling. So, therefore, they could not conduct these marriages in the part of Bengaluru which was under the Mysore Maharaja. So, they had to conduct most of these marriages in the cantonment area which was directly ruled under the British. And some of these marriages, DVG has done Paurohitya, because he knew some of the DVG and Venkata Varada Iyengar, who was running the Abalashrama here. They have done Paurohitya for widow marriages. So that is the time where he also came to know of Veereshalingam Pantulu. There was one episode where there was an accusation levelled by this guy called Tangaturu Sriramulu. They used to have this paper called the Carlylean. So he said, oh, there is somebody who is in the Abalashrama who is serving, quote unquote, serving Veereshalingam Pantulu. And there was a case and everything. Finally, it turned out that Veereshalingam Pantulu had some, very bad skin on the back on his back and boils and things like that. It had some Ayurvedic oil had to be applied on his back regularly. But his wife, Rajalakshmama, was already very old and frail. She could not apply it. So one of the younger women in the ashram would apply this taila on his back. That's all happened. But the way in which the newspaper and other people wrote about it, as if there is some big affair and scandal happening. DVG writes, a few old gods like me, few and far between, may vaguely remember Tangaturu Sriramulu's name, and those memories may be toxic. However, memories of Veereshalingam Pantulu are rich with detail and stand firmly in our hearts. See the contrast. So people, it's very easy to level accusations. And in the case of this Dayaram Gidumal, who was he was, I think, a judge, if I remember, he was a district judge. He was a district judge in some Shikaripur or somewhere. He's from the Sindh province. He's a Sindhi. He was also running a Abalashrama, Anathalaya, before Gandhi came into prominence. So this was just after the time of people like Ram Mohan Roy, Dayanand Saraswati, Vivekananda. They were the prominent names in public service, public reforms. And Dayaram Gidumal and his wife had started this orphanage. Then it was going well. Suddenly one day the news came that he is coming out of all public institutions and he is retiring from active public life. What happened was that there was some news that a young lady in that ashram either was killed or had become pregnant, and there were rumors that he was the one who was responsible for that girl becoming pregnant, and so on. But Dayaram did not give any voice to any of these speculations. He never responded. Nobody knew what happened to them. 2 years they were missing. Then after 2 years, slowly the mystery came out and was unraveled. It turns out indeed there was a girl in that Abalashrama who had become pregnant, and at that point of time she was thinking of committing suicide. and she was not willing to reveal the name of the man who was responsible for it. This, by the time it reached the Aram Gidumal, it must have been about 1 or 2 weeks. Then he and his wife discussed and said, that we don't know who this person is. If we don't do something about this, this girl may take the extreme step. So for the sake of the well-being of that girl, the Aram Gidumal himself took the responsibility, and it was said, okay, although he has not done anything, he has taken the blame just for the sake of somebody else's life. So DVG says it is the way in which you can support society not always is by doing something, but also sometimes by accepting a false accusation. So in public life, integrity is very different. Private life, it is very different. So he is willing to let go. He says, what is the worst thing that will happen? People may say something loose about me, but here it is the actual life of this girl which is at stake. So let people say whatever they want, but this, it doesn't, it's not right. So it doesn't matter, he says, if people hurl accusations on me, if that leads to the salvation of someone, we should be prepared to bear the harsh consequences. This is the nature of a true public figure. With this, we come to the end of the 6th volume of the Jnapaka Chitra Shaale. Tomorrow we'll begin with the 7th volume. Thank you very much. Namaskar.